Boker Tov, good morning. Welcome, everybody. My video screen is back, so thank God for that. Obviously, that was some type of glitch on the program here. Much better for me and my experience because I'm not looking at a blank screen, which is, I don't know, psychological. I feel, even once you've been doing this for so many years, I guess, throws you off a little bit. But that's just me. Doesn't affect you, but it affects me. So I'm glad it's back. Makes it easier. I feel like I'm talking to somebody as opposed to just looking at a blank black box, which is kind of weird. Anyway, so those are my struggles. Good morning. Glad you're here. Welcome to the Aliyah today. We are in the third portion of the third Aliyah, that is, of Parasha Tzav. Yesterday, we talked about blood and fats. And today we're going to be continuing that conversation. The third Aliyah is about the installation of the priesthood. However, we're going to stick with this theme of blood because I mentioned fasting yesterday, and Pituke Hotam has a really interesting insight with respect to fasting. It really kind of confirms what I was talking about yesterday. And then I want to get into the forbidden and permitted bloods, which blood is forbidden and which blood is permitted. We'll talk about that. And then we'll get as far as we can get into the salting aspect, salting meat and so forth. Mayam Loez has many pages about salting and the halakha regarding salting. We're not going to get through it all because I could just tell you right now, it's way too much, but we're going to get as fast as we can. So yesterday I mentioned meat and dairy separation as well. Pardon me. Meat and dairy separation always seems to be for some, I'm going to say for some strange reason, but then I'm going to correct myself and say actually another reason. It's a really big deal for a lot of people. Like they really hate the idea of separating meat and dairy. It's really interesting to me. There's people that have no problem with eating kosher. Some people have no problem even with eating real kosher. I mentioned about being clean, eating clean yesterday, and how that's a good step. It's a good initiative, but it's not eating kosher. And there's also many issues with that because you're eating treifa meat, which is also not good. But when it comes to the issue of separating meat and dairy, non-Jews, man, they're passionate about how much they hate that. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's spiritual. It's a spiritual issue. And I know there's people who are not going to want to hear that. And I appreciate that. But it's not. It's a spiritual problem. Mixing meat and dairy, as Zach and Rayford has explored in his 2 sessions he did on it, is very much driven by the demonic realm. And it's deeply mystical, by the way, because you might be asking yourself, what's the big deal? Well, I could tell you that there are some legitimate health issues with respect to mixing meat and dairy in your dietary system. But really, that's just kind of like a sidebar. It's almost like it's like a added benefit. I could tell you stories about that, but I'm not going to spend time doing that. People have I've had 2 people talk to me about that, how it's completely eradicated. Separation of meat and dairy for them, completely eradicated, years and years of digestive issues. But again, that's not really the point. Okay. So that's just kind of a side thing because you might be out there saying, well, it doesn't bother me. And that's true. It didn't bother me either. It's not really the issue. The issue is spiritual. My question to those who really can't let it go is why? What's the big deal? I mean, really, what's the big deal? You have to have a cheeseburger? I'm just asking. And besides, in our day and age, you could have a hamburger with kosher certified vegetarian cheese and it pretty much tastes the same. So I don't really understand the problem. So what is the problem? Why is it such a problem for you? I'm just asking. That's something for you. There are people out there who continue to try to research this and find out what the scripture is saying. And that's fine. People are welcome to do what they want. However, the matter is not up for debate. It has been settled thousands of years ago by actual Torah scholars who are all in agreement. Even the Samaritans did not mix meat and dairy together, and they weren't exactly in concert with the Pharisees. But this issue of meat and dairy separation, I just want to tell you right now, is a settled matter. All Jews believe it, even Reform Jews. You might be sitting across the table from a Reform Jew who's sitting there eating shrimp cocktail in front of you, and you tell them that you're eating kosher, but you don't separate meat and dairy. They're going to laugh at you. They're going to laugh at you in a friendly way, but they're definitely going to laugh at you because that is not kosher. Okay, we're done with it. I just want to let you know that there's nothing to discuss. There's nothing to debate on the issue, with all due respect. Okay, thousands upon thousands of Torah scholars have said that it means what it means. Okay, so there's that. Now, with that said, I've created a playlist of the teachings that we've done on meat and dairy separation that is now on the channel in a cozy little playlist for you, and you can access it there. And so that's that. Now, people are going to do what they want to do, and they're going to live the way they want to live, and that's fine. But it doesn't make it right. It just means that you have the freedom to do what you want. So there's that. Also want to mention about fats and how, in fact, I read, it was Eliezer who had a comment on the channel I read after the fact. And he talked about, when you eat non-kosher meat, you may in fact be eating forbidden fats. And that's one of the problems of trying to be clean, but not kosher. And when I read that, I thought to myself, that's a really great point. And I forgot to mention yesterday that one of the biggest problems of eating quote unquote clean and not eating kosher is when one attempts to eat or purchase or whatever a hamburger meat. Yikes. I don't even have to talk about the fact that in non-kosher markets, they have discovered that this has been in the news. This is not kooky duke stuff. I am not a kooky duke, I promise you. Nothing I tell you is nutsy or not backed up by facts or history or whatever. Anyway, but there's been in the news before that they tested, ground beef and found that it wasn't 100% beef. There's pink slime. There was a report years ago that they were mixing in horse meat with the beef to make it go faster or longer or further. But putting all that aside, the fact that you may not actually be eating, a beef, but rather a beef-like substance, putting that aside, ground beef is the worst because how do you know that there's not forbidden fats mixed up in there? And see, this is why kosher eating is so important. So I want to throw that out there as well, and make you aware of those two things. I just had those on my mind as we get started this morning. So as we're diving into the issue of fasting, I'm going to look at Pituke Hotam. Before I do that, let me say good morning to everybody. Good morning to you, Clayton from Helena, Arkansas. I hope you're doing great. Devorah, good morning. Corin, I was thinking about you and Moshe this morning, and I said to myself, Corin and Moshe should surprise us and come to Passover. I mean, come on. You're just across the pond. You can just hop on a plane there in Frankfurt. You can be here in 8 hours. What's the big deal? Really, though, we want to see you. Good morning, Christopher, good morning to you. Peaches, good morning. Devorah, good morning to you. Kristen, hope you're doing fantastic. Gianna, hope you're enjoying the fresh air of the Republic of Texas. Who else do we have? Nelly Grace, good morning to you, ma'am. Hope life is treating you well. Amana, good to see you as well. And Leah, there in sunny Florida. Marita, hope you're feeling, you were not feeling well yesterday, right, Marita? Hope you're doing better. I think that was the case. Pretty sure it was. Good morning, Brenda. Good morning, Isaac. Hope you're doing great. Yeah, Hebrew National Hot Dogs, Isaac. The hot dogs of choice. If you happen to have a Costco membership, I don't know, at our Costco, they have them in bigger packs. That's more affordable, but there's that. Isaac. Leah, good morning to you. Kelly, good morning. Yes, beef salami. Yeah, that's great. Emmanuel, good morning from Nigeria. Did I say good morning to you, Kristen? I think I did. Chanel, good morning to you. Levi, good morning. Hope you're doing fantastic. Ami, good morning. Hope you and Claire are doing great. Yeah, I love salami. But there's beef salami. You can get it at the kosher markets. I love it. It's totally not good for you, which is a good. By the way, a lot of people think that kosher eating has to do with health, but it doesn't really. There's plenty of things you can eat that are perfectly kosher and definitely not healthy. So, I mean, there's plenty of, anyway, we don't have to go into that. We know, like Donuts are kosher, can be kosher, but they're definitely not good for you. Ariella, good morning. Shoshana, good morning to you and Yaakov. Hope you're doing fantastic. Who else do we have here? Did I miss anybody? John, watching from India. Good morning, John. Hope you're doing great. I love Indian food, by the way. Just as a sidebar. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Don't get to have it very often because it's, you have to make it myself, or we make it ourselves, or Daniel's mother makes it for us. Hello, hashtag, where are you? Akwi Batala. Did I say that right? Am I pronouncing your name properly? Where are you watching from? Please tell us. That'd be fantastic. Haas, good morning. Shoshana Keith. Yes, Twinkies. Twinkies are not only kosher, but they can survive a nuclear attack. It may be the only food that you have in such attack. They withstand pretty much anything. And they're also good for like 20 or 30 years. Smiley, good morning. So hope you're doing great as well. All right, so let's dive into this, shall we? Now that we talked about food, let's talk about fasting. Pituke Hotam is commenting on the verse in chapter 7, verses 29 through 30, that says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, when one offers his peace offering to HaShem, he shall bring his offering to HaShem from his peace offering. With his own hands shall he bring the fire offering of HaShem. The fat atop the breast shall be bring the breast in order to wave it as a waving before HaShem. Good morning, Michelle. Hope you're doing great. And good morning, Milka. Did we miss? I missed you somehow, Michelle, or Atara. Excuse me. I just saw your name and suddenly just read it. Atari, I didn't see you up there. Sorry about that. So good morning, Sergio. I miss you too, Sergio. Did I skip that? Sometimes my little thing skips. It just like jumps. And I'm sorry if Roy, I think I missed you too. And Sarah Diaz. Yeah, I think I missed the whole section here. Yolanda. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies. My little thing just skipped right over. Good morning, Lynn. I missed you too, Lynn. I missed everybody. Miss Shoshana. I'm not sure what happened here. Morgan, good morning, sir. You're with your wife, which is a good thing. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what happened. I skipped over something. Marita, just start over. Greg, I missed you too. Listen, if I missed you, I'm so sorry. Marita, start over. All right, let's start it all over, shall we? No, we're not going to do that. So let's look at this. So this is again talking about the fats being offered up. And it goes along with what I was saying yesterday, as I waxed so eloquently on the issue of fasting and fats and so forth. Good morning, Eliezer. So it says here, this is Pituke Hotam. When a person fasts, it takes the place of an offering. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let me pause here and say that I get asked all the time from non-Jews, and they say, how can you possibly keep the laws of Moses? It's impossible. So this is their reasoning. And I mentioned this yesterday, but let me repeat myself. This is their reasoning as to why the law is done away with. Of course, it's been done away with. Of course it has. Because you can't keep it because there isn't you don't do sacrificing. And of course, we talked yesterday about this was the fact with the Babylonian exile too, and so no one ever thinks about that. But we talked about that yesterday. So putting all that aside, I want to come back to the idea in Judaism that if I was sitting across from a non-Jewish person, I imagine having the conversation and saying to them, we can't literally offer sacrifices in the temple because there isn't a temple. And actually, when you can't do something, no fault to your own, in this case, there's not a temple, not doing something counts as a mitzvah. And okay, that's number one. So even though we can't offer sacrifices, it's not our fault. Okay, if there was a temple, we would. But since we can't, therefore, since we're not doing it, and doing it would be a sin without the temple, therefore not doing it is actually counted as a mitzvah. We're actually keeping that mitzvah and not doing it. That's number one. Number two, Jewish law teaches that we can do other things that count as offering a sacrifice. One is prayer. Another is studying about the sacrifices. Okay. And a third is fasting. All three of those things count as if we had offered a sacrifice. And I also mentioned yesterday about offering our sons for bris milah and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, I can imagine that if I was having a conversation, and correct me if you think I'm wrong about this. And Sergio, that's a good point. I just happened to glance down and see Sergio's. Your body's a temple. Thank you, Sergio. Which is why are you bringing pork into the temple? Would you bring swine into the holy temple and eat it? If I ask most of you that question out there in the the millions who are watching here, you would say to me, "No way would I do that. Like I would not bring a pig into the temple of God, slaughter it and eat it. No way. I feel like lightning would strike me from heaven." And of course, it would. So, since you're the temple of God, why are you bringing swine into the temple? Okay, so there's that. Put that aside. But correct me if I'm wrong. If I was having a conversation with a non-Jew about what I just said about fasting and it being equivalent to a sacrifice, I feel like they would mock me and laugh at me and say, where is that written? You're making that up. You're making a loophole. Things of that nature. Do you think that would be the case? I think so, based on the experiences I've had. And my comment to that is that's interesting because, as I said yesterday, we are accused of being legalistic, but yet what I just said to you is not legalism at all. But in other words, if you say, no, you have to bring a sacrifice to the temple and sacrifice it, and if you don't, that doesn't count, period. That's legalism. But if I tell you, actually, if you fast and pray and study the fast and study the sacrifices, then that's counted as if you offered a literal sacrifice. That to me is grace and kindness and mercy and making keeping the commandments easy. Is it not? Am I wrong in that? Am I wrong there? So it's interesting to me that the very people who accuse us of being legalistic are themselves legalists. So it goes on to say, just as the blood and fats are given from an animal offering, so too when a person fasts, he gives up some of his own fats and blood. On a fast day, a person must also give money to tzedakah, similarly to the breast portion of the offering. So in this case, what Pituke Hotam is saying is that the money that you give to charity is like waving the portion before the Lord. So your giving, whether it be tithing or whatever, is like a wave offering. So think about it that way. For those of you who are joining the call and maybe for the first time you're stepping out in trust and bitachon to begin tithing, I want you to think about every time you tithe, it's counted as if you've offered up the Thanksgiving wave offering before Hashem. How powerful is that? So it says here, on a fast day, a person must give money. This is similar to the portion of the offering that's waved that is given to the Kohen, so that his offering shall be complete. So your giving is actually the completion of your offering. So I wanted. It says here, and this is a couple of quotes, one quote anyway, at least from Pituke Hotam to this verse. He says, "Hamakriv et zevach shelamash le'Adonai." Excuse me, shelamav le'Adonai. When one offers his peace offering to Hashem, the word et, because in Hebrew the word aleph tav is here et. Et indicates a direct object, but does not have an equivalent in English. It is an acronym for Af Tanit, which means also a fast. So he's saying here, he's bringing down that the word et is a acronym for also a fast. In other words, a fast is similar to an offering, just as an offering atones, so a fast brings atonement. It's talking here about forgiveness of sins and things of that nature, right? It makes more sense now when you see that Yeshua told the Talmudim that this one doesn't, some demons, right, you come out through prayer and fasting. So what's the mystery of fasting? The mystery of fasting is that you offer a sacrifice, but it's not just like a regular sacrifice. It's almost like a higher level because you're offering the sacrifice of self. Right. So that's the point I wanted to bring out there about fasting. Now let's look at moving on now to forbidden blood, forbidden and permitted blood. So there are some blood that is permitted. Good morning, Joseph from Miami. Joseph, watching from Miami. That's right. You're in Miami, you and Peggy. So glad you guys are here. This is the place to discuss. This is Ma'am Loez, I should add. This is the place to discuss all the laws of blood. We will begin by discussing which blood is forbidden and which blood is permitted so that a person will not become involved in a violation. Well, thank you, Joseph. Thank you. He said, I look great. Baruch HaShem. Thank you. You look great too, Joseph. I can see you. The blood, it says that the Torah forbids the blood of every animal and bird, whether kosher or non-kosher. Okay, so no blood whatsoever. The blood of an aborted fetus is also forbidden. The blood of fish and kosher locusts is permitted. Today, we do not know which locusts are permitted and which are forbidden, so we do not eat any locusts whatsoever. That's an important point for all of you who were about to rush out to the store and look for locusts to have for your barbecue this coming week. I hate to be Debbie Downer, but we don't know which locusts were the ones that were permitted and which ones were forbidden. So therefore, we don't eat locusts. I'm sorry. I know that's a big disappointment to a lot of people because you were thinking about that for your Shabbat meal, barbecued locust, salted locust, locust boil, but we don't have that anymore. Good morning, John. Hope you're doing great. Any blood found in eggs is forbidden. Therefore, if any blood is discovered in an egg, whether in the yolk or the white, the entire egg is forbidden. Even if the blood is removed, the rest of the egg may not be eaten. This is why there's a custom in Judaism, always has been, when you're cracking eggs and mixing them together for whatever you do, that you crack one egg into a bowl by itself. You just don't add it automatically. Because what if there's blood in the egg and then it would make all the other eggs in the bowl obviously forbidden? So that's why the custom is pretty obvious, I guess. But I just want to mention that. If eggs are beaten in a dish and mixed together and then blood is found in one of them, then all the eggs are forbidden, just like I just said. This is true even if the yolk containing the blood is removed before it's mixed with the other eggs. So in other words, if the egg has blood, you have to throw the whole thing out and so forth. Since the whites of the eggs are mixed together, all is forbidden. However, if one is mixing eggs in a dish and yolks are not mixed together, but each one is alone, one can remove the yolk that do not have blood one by one and place them in another dish. He should then leave the egg having the blood in the first dish with the whites of the egg. The yolk that has been moved to the second dish are then permitted. However, if it is forbidden to do the opposite, throwing away the egg that has the blood and leaving the other eggs. As we said earlier, it is impossible that the whites of the eggs did not mix together. This is talking about if you were cracking eggs and putting them into one bowl, then you did that, the one you cracked had blood in it. Everything is forbidden. This is, again, the way to avoid all this and to make it just simple is just when you're making an egg dish, crack it, put it in a bowl. If it looks good, put it in another bowl. Do number 2, same thing. Number 3, same thing. God forbid, number 4 has blood in it. Then you just throw it out. Kosher that is, bring it back. So it says all the laws that we have discussed are only true if the eggs have been mixed in a cold dish, which is not the fire, etc. However, if one opens the eggs in a dish that is over the fire, the laws are different, and one must ask a rabbi what to do. We are permitted to eat hard-boiled or baked eggs, even though it is impossible to examine them to see if they have blood. By the way, that I just want to comment on the ask the rabbi part. In any Jewish, all orthodoxy is guided by Jewish law, halacha. However, In any Jewish community, and I want to emphasize this fact, in any Jewish community, the halakha is ultimately left up to the rabbi. That's one of the big responsibilities of the rabbi is um, establishing the halakha for the community. And naturally, the halakha has to be based on on the halakha. He can't just be crazy and just say, "Oh yeah, eat shrimp." Oh yeah, mixed meat and cheese together. That's cool. Can't do that because those would be sins, of course. But there's other issues and nuances that aren't exactly so black and white, and that's why "Ask the Rabbi" is a almost like a cliche. It's a refrain that you'll hear in any and every discussion. If you're reading something online about somebody had a halakhic question and they go to some random Orthodox Jewish website, whoever the rabbi is that responds to that, you will almost inevitably see them at the end of their conversation say, "This is what I'm saying, but you should ask your rabbi." And that's a very important point. The other important point about that is that this creates an important aspect known as unity within the community. It's really bad to have a community whereby everybody's doing different things together. That is not good. And so it will create havoc, it will create division, it will create all kinds of psychological, emotional, and spiritual problems. And so this is why the rabbi setting the halakha for the community is so vital, because everybody in the community needs to be doing the same things together. I don't care if you're Moshe and Corin who live there in Germany, if you're one of our other peeps who live in the United Kingdom, South Africa, Texas, faraway Oklahoma, beautiful Florida, California. We're all doing the same things together. When you come to my house, we do Erev a certain way. When you travel to the Smith's home, you're going to do Erev the exact same way. And this is really, really important. So I wanted to just mention that as well. It says, we said earlier that it is permissible to consume the blood of fish. However, this is only true if the blood is with the fish. If the blood is strained and placed in a dish alone, we are forbidden to consume it because of the appearance of the appearance of evil, basically. Somebody seeing a person drinking this blood may assume that is the blood of a mammal or a bird, which is forbidden. It is obvious that it is obvious that it is fish blood, in that it contains some scales. Therefore, it's permitted. The point being here is that the idea of avoiding the appearance of evil is a very solidly Jewish thing. It says human blood by itself is also forbidden because of appearances. Therefore, if a person bites bread and blood from his gum is absorbed by the bread, one should not eat any of the blood-stained bread, but must remove it. However, if one's gums are bleeding, it's permitted to suck the blood, and there is no prohibition. This is obviously talking about your own blood, okay? So you're not permitted to drink somebody else's blood, of course. But again, it's saying here, you don't want to have the appearance of evil. So if you eat something and there's blood-stained bread, somehow, some way, this giving an example here of bleeding gums, then you should discard the bread and not eat it just because it's unseemly. Somebody asked on the channel about blood transfusions. Are those okay? The answer, of course, is yes. Because first of all, that doesn't have anything to do with eating. And yes, there is a difference between eating and injecting or whatever. But more importantly, it has to do with saving or protecting life. So any halakha, no matter what, can be set aside for saving and protecting life. I had somebody on the channel object about kosher eating as a non-Jewish person. And they, a lot of people, look, there's a lot of mental health issues out there, but they get on the channel and they automatically just start ranting, and not asking a question, just ranting. And they start ranting about, but if you were starving and you're forbidding people to eat pork. Well, actually, if you just listen for a minute, you might, or ask a question. You might ask a question. What if somebody is starving? They're literally starving. Now in America, nobody is starving. Can I just say that out loud? And in the United States, in Los Estados Unidos, there ain't nobody starving. I promise you. Okay. If you think you're starving in America, you need to go to Haiti. or Jamaica or Africa and see what real life looks like. You're not starving. Okay. I promise you. Anyway, but if you were in fact actually starving, then you could in fact eat pork. Yes. You can do anything. Okay. To save or protect life except three things. Number one, you can't murder anybody. Well, I should say number one should be idolatry. You cannot commit idolatry. That's how important not being idolatrous is. Number one. Number two. So by the way, just as an aside, this means you can't go to the Christmas party or the Easter get together just to make mom and dad happy, or brother and sister happy, or aunt and uncle happy. You see what I'm saying? That has nothing to do with protecting or saving life, but I brought that out because some people think, well, I don't want to create trouble with my family, and I get it, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So going back, so you can't commit idolatry, can't commit murder, and you cannot commit adultery. Those three things, no matter what, cannot be violated. Okay, so you can have a blood transfusion. So that has to do with forbidden and permitted bloods. Looking now, so really the only permitted blood is fish blood. And of course, it's talking about when you're, eating the fish and so on and so forth, right? Fish is not considered meat. By the way, that's another thing. Neither are eggs. So you can have cheese with cheese with fish, or you can have cheese or cheese or dairy or whatever with milk, cheese, dairy, yogurt, curds, whatever, with fish or eggs. I just want to make that that's a very common question, by the way, and rightfully so. And so I just want to make that mention. And of course, fowl is also considered meat. It's actually considered meat in the Torah by God. So naturally, we cannot have cheese with chicken or turkey or anything like that. So okay, now we come to salting meat. And man, there's a lot about salting. But in the time we have, let's just get to, that's not going to be much. I may have to come back and do another segment on this, I know, because there's so much about it. Now, I want to say, by the way, that when you buy kosher meat from a kosher meat market in the United States, I don't know about other countries, I'm probably the same, but it's also in the United States, this is the truth. The meat's already been salted. And so this is largely not applicable to most of us because we get that meat, it's already been salted. However, and if you don't know, you just ask the kosher butcher if that's the case. But what if somebody is slaughtering their own meat? You can slaughter your own meat, okay, as long as you're doing it for yourself. Now, there's a kosher slaughtering process, and you should study about that and so forth and so on. Kristen asked if duck eggs are kosher. Duck is kosher. So I'm assuming duck, so therefore duck eggs would be kosher. By the way, I see a lot of non-Jewish, like Hebrew roots posts on social media, and they're talking about forbidden foods, like, pig is forbidden, but cow is not, and so forth. And for some reason, and maybe you on the channel can answer this question for me, a lot of Gentiles on these Hebrew root sites will list duck as not kosher. And I don't have any idea why that is the case, because I have a kosher duck in my freezer right now. So duck is absolutely kosher. And the one I have in the freezer happens to be glot kosher. But the point being there is that it is in fact kosher. I don't have any idea why. Well, aside from ignorance, which is just, that plagues the Hebrew roots movement, unfortunately, but that's why we're here to help. But I don't understand why that's the issue. So it says, we will now discuss the laws of salting, which is called in Hebrew, melicha. Meat must be salted to remove any forbidden blood that may still be in the meat. So if you get packaged kosher meat and you see sometimes it does have blood in there. It's pretty obvious, but there's such thing as called meat juice. It's like but it's usually like a more watery red. as opposed to the thicker blood red. But that's fairly obvious to know the difference. It says blood cannot be removed from meat except by proper salting and washing. So the process of salting is as follows. Before salting the meat, it should be placed in a vessel full of water and allowed to remain there approximately 1/2 hour. If one does not soak the meat but merely washes it well, it is sufficient. However, it is best to actually soak it. There are 3 reasons that the meat initially should be soaked. Number 1, it softens the meat so that blood can drain out. 2, salt can only remove the blood inside the meat since it's still moist. The blood on the surface of the meat is dry and the salt cannot remove it. Therefore, the meat should be soaked so that the salt will also be able to remove the blood near the surface. Number 3, some say that the reason for soaking the meat is to remove the surface blood. If this is not done, the salt absorbs the surface blood and cannot draw out the blood that is below the surface. So it is customary not to use the vessel used to soak meat before salting for other purposes. The same is true for the one used to rinse it after the salting. No food should be placed in these vessels. However, if the vessel is used even for hot foods, the food does not become forbidden. So in other words, it's customary not to use that salting vessel for any other purpose. But if you do use it, it doesn't invalidate it. This is more kind of like a recommended custom, but there's no forbidden nature into it. If one forgot and left the meat soaking in that vessel for 24 hours, both the vessel and the soaked meat become forbidden. I can't imagine somebody forgetting that, but it does happen, that type of stuff. But you should just know that the meat is now forbidden and the vessel must be tossed as well. After the meat is soaked for approximately 1/2 hour, it is removed from the water. The one should wait a few moments until the water drips off before salting it. If the meat is too wet, the salt will dissolve very quickly, and the meat is salted will not draw out the blood. One must also be careful not to wait too long before salting the meat. If the meat becomes totally dry, the salt, it won't work. So you got to, let it drain a little bit and then put the salt on there. So it says, if after soaking the meat, one cuts into smaller pieces, he must soak it or wash it off. Again, the same is true if he soaks the animal feet and then removes the hooves. If he does not do this, it is as if the meat was not rinsed off at all. If one salts the meat without washing it, the remedy is to wash off the meat and soak it again. This remedy helps even if the salt was originally left on for the unusual time. However, if one does not soak the meat and resalts it, it may not be cooked. It can only be eaten roasted over an open fire. There are some authorities that maintain that in such a case, if the meat has been salted without having been soaked, there is no remedy and it cannot be washed off and resalted. According to this opinion, the meat becomes forbidden. Therefore, one should depend on the leniency option only if it is a case where one would incur great loss, or if it is right before the Sabbath or a festival when it is very difficult to find other food. Even then, the lenient option is valid only if the meat has been soaked and salted a second time. That's going to take us to the end of our Aliyah. There's more on salt and the salting process. We may get to some of that tomorrow as we look at other aspects of Tzav. I want to conclude by saying this reminded me as I was reading that about leniency and so forth. As a general practice, one should be lenient on others and more stringent on themselves. That's often not the case. A lot of times we are more stringent on other people and we give ourselves a pass. But the Jewish heart and the Jewish mind is supposed to be the opposite. Be lenient with other people and be more stringent on yourself. That's really the concept I wanted to end with as we're talking about these conversations and how to live everyday life, not just in what we eat, but in how we live. So Todah Rabbah for being here. I'm so glad that you're a part of this. We'll continue tomorrow with more discussions on the halacha of the offerings and so forth. We may get to some of this salting as well. Just an interesting read about salting process, very involved. There's many, many pages here. But until then, have a great and amazing day. Look forward to seeing you mañana. Shalom Aleichem to all of you. Remember to like this video, share it with all of your friends, and give to Lapid Judaism. Remember, your tithing is like the wave offering. And I think that's a really neat insight. So shalom aleichem. Be a great and amazing day. Have a great and amazing day. or be one, whatever you want to do.